Modern pickup trucks, whether they be ICE or electric, come with side steps as standard. And on an EV like the Ford F-150 Lightning, the side step is a great thing to have because it helps hide the fact that you've got a massive battery pack down there. But it can also get in the way. Like when I crashed my truck back in 2024, it wasn't actually the ice that crashed my truck. It wasn't the fact that I lost the ability to brake or control my direction. It was the fact that my side steps got caught on the metal guy wire that goes around the power line to make sure that it properly stands up, that then ripped off the side step and pulled the power line down on top of my truck. So for a while now, I've been investigating the possibility of electric side steps. They have some benefits over static ones. They can go out lower and further out away from the truck, making it easier for people with mobility issues to get in and out of the vehicle, regardless of whether your vehicle is lifted or not. They also tuck up nicely when not in use, giving you a smoother, cleaner airflow as you're driving along. At least, that's my impression of them. So when WOLFBOX reached out and said, hey, we'd like you to test our electric side steps for the Ford F-150, and that includes the F-150 Lightning, I said, sure, send them over. We'll put them through their paces. As you probably guessed by now, this is a gifted review. That means that WOLFBOX sent us a product for free to fit onto our vehicle and test it. But unlike a lot of YouTube channels out there that do gifted reviews where they work with the quote-unquote sponsor to make sure that the messaging is correct, we have a really strict policy here at TE. We get the product free of charge, we test it out, and the company gets no say in how our review is structured, what we say, or in fact, whether we like the product or not. Which is why, under YouTube and US federal rules, this video is marked as quote-unquote sponsored. But I also want you to know that this install is going to be slightly different because I'm not going to follow the official installation procedure. That's because the official installation procedure asks you to put a whole bunch of wires and control boxes up front in what would be the engine bay in an ICE F-150 or behind the frunk in a Lightning. And I think I've found a better way of installing it. Everything is laid out in the bed of my F-150 Lightning. I haven't included some shim brackets that do come in the box as standard. You don't need them for the Lightning. They are designed if you have a Ford Super Duty pickup truck, but since the Lightning is not a Super Duty, we do not need it. So in the box, you get this lovely full color instruction booklet. You get the side steps, you get the mounting brackets that mount the motor and the operating mechanism to the underside of the truck in factory location. And then you get a bunch of wiring looms. You also get the hardware you need to mount everything to your vehicle. You get these plastic squares that have holes in them. They're basically washers that you have to put between the body of the truck and these. I don't know if it's to prevent galvanic corrosion or something, but it's part of the installation process and we will be following it. You also get these things, which are the little wire taps that you're supposed to use to tap the CAN high and CAN low signal that tells the control box when you open the door. That is the standard installation process, but I am not splicing a very expensive electric pickup truck Loom with these. I've talked about this in previous videos, so instead I have spent the weekend making this. This is my custom pass-through cable. Basically it takes a factory wiring loom in here and then this plugs back where the factory loom was meant to plug in, and then it breaks out the CAN wires, and I will be making a little adapter to go onto that custom wire to make sure that if I ever want to remove this, I can do so without ever affecting my truck. As I mentioned earlier, the official installation process involves putting everything at the front of the vehicle, but we're going to reverse it. We're going to put everything at the rear of the vehicle. So let's get on and go through that process now. But to start, I'm going to have to take off the original side steps. So I've already cheated and removed the first side step. We're now working on the passenger side, and I'm going to talk you through the process. The first thing we need to do is unplug this. This is the light that the Lariat version of the F-150 Lightning has as an extra accessory light that comes on when the vehicle is unlocked. And the first thing you're going to need to do is get your pry tool in here, your trim removal tool, just gently pull this up. And then we're going to just get that pry removal tool in behind there, give it a gentle pull, and that plug is going to come loose, or that cable plug, I suppose. The next thing we're going to do is remove the plug, and there is actually a little tang right at the top that you have to squeeze on this side here. So I'm going to push in right here, really quite hard, and then wiggle the connector, and it will come out. With the light cable disconnected, we're just going to go ahead with a 14mm socket and unbolt these. Now there's 3 for the front and 3 for the rear. 1 at the top and 2 at the bottom. With all 6 bolts and the lighting connector removed, we can actually now twist this step off. And when I say twist, what I mean is we're going to have to move the entire step towards the center of the truck, and then we have to twist it to make sure that we don't catch the paint as we pull this step off. So what we have to do is kind of lift it forwards and down, and there you go. I know that this is comically oversized, but I live in the Pacific Northwest and I want to make sure that this does not have issues with moisture, just in case I want to go back to the stock setup. So I'm actually going to cheat. I'm going to hold that there, and then I'm going to use a heat gun to shrink this. It goes without saying that heat guns are hot, but you know, be careful. The official documents for this say that this loom needs to be up in the front trunk or the engine bay, depending on what type of F-150 you have. And then you connect this to the positive terminal on the battery, and then obviously you connect the other one to the negative terminal. And that's fine. But I live out in the country, that's my rooster, and when summer comes, we are driving basically through dirt tracks all the time. And the inside of that front bay in my truck, where the 12-volt battery is, gets really dirty and dusty, whereas the back of the cab is nice and dirt and dust free. It's fairly easy to properly mount it, so it's not going to have vibration issues. And it also means I don't have to cut any holes in any existing grommets to push these extra wires through. Now I'm going to have to make holes for grommet pass-through for some other projects that I've got planned for this truck, but for this one I want to try and make it as easily reversible as possible. And so for that, I'm going to have to run some power cables from the fuse box in the front passenger footwell back to here, because the stock loom doesn't have quite enough length for me to properly do that. So I need to take off the sill cover plates, and then I'm just going to pass the cable all the way through this side of the truck for the power, and then on that side of the truck where the camera is, I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to do the CAN wire, which is this little one here. So let's get that done. I have reached the point of no return because I have just snipped off the negative battery terminal post. I've also put some heat shrink on here because I've learned from previous mistakes that sometimes mistakes like that mean that you don't get the thing where you need it. So I'm just moving that way up there. And this is a proper automotive grade butt connector that also has heat shrink in it. I'm going to use my very nice Klein Tools crimping tool. It is yellow, so I'm going to match the yellow up with yellow, and I'm going to crimp it. Fingers crossed. All right. So that is a really nice solid crimp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the negative that's coming from the front of the truck. I'm going to strip that and I'm going to crimp that. I'm also now going to get the heat gun, which I'm very nervous about. I'm going to use a very low heat on this. All right, so I've done the negative terminal, right, from the battery. And now I need to do the same thing to the positive terminal. We have successfully connected the power line and the earth line to this, to the fuses, or rather to the front of the box. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to put the harness down here, down in this little space here next to the jack. And it's only going to be a temporary position, but eventually we will properly make a mount to put it in. I have routed this cable, which is the CAN cable that controls when the steps deploy and retract, up to the front of the driver's footwell. And again, I've gone through the sill panels, and the reason I've done that is because I didn't want to poke a hole in the bottom of the truck. There's a rubber grommet just underneath the driver footwell that you can cut a hole in and push this cable through if you want to do it the official way. Now we get to the part of the install where things really are very different. I mean, they've been pretty different up to now, but this is where my install is something that I've come up with myself. All right, so this bit is completely me. This black box here is the trailer control module, trailer brake control module, I think it's called. It's got two connectors in it. They're both members of the Stack 64 family. That's STAC 64. And this sits just behind the front footwell in a little metal bracket, and you just depress this tab here and you can pull it out. In the official documentation for these side steps, what WOLFBOX wants you to do is to tap two of these wires using wire taps rather than do anything fancy. But what I've done is come up with this connector that is wired straight through and just has the breakout for the CAN cable. So this bit's going to plug in to this cable, and then this end is going to plug into the black box where the cable was originally plugged in, and then this one is going to plug into this cable that I've just crimped on. And you'll see it has an H and an L. That means high and low for the CAN. And I have matched that up with high and low on the CAN like that. And hopefully it will all go together. It's really tricky for me to show this to you because my body is going to get in the way in order for me to achieve it, but I will try my best while seated here on the ground to make it look half understandable. So I've unplugged the original connector that went into that black trailer module. I'm then connecting this up here, like so. If I make sure I get it the right way around. And it clicks into position. And then this end will plug in like that. And then this CAN cable if I get it the right way around, will plug in like that. And hopefully this now makes this completely reversible. I have not tapped into anything in the truck that cannot be removed. At this point in the installation, I have diverged quite dramatically from the official documentation. And so I wanted to make sure that my little Loom, as I'm going to call it, actually works. I wanted to make sure that my power works from the front of the truck to the back. And I want to make sure that this motor, which is the passenger side motor, actually opens the step when I open the door. There'll be a slight pause, but watch. Yes. And then there'll be a slight pause. And then it'll close. We've got to, I think, the scariest part of this whole process for me. We have confirmed that in order to get the steps to deploy correctly, we need the driver side motor and the driver side motor harness on this side, and then the passenger side and the passenger side motor on the other. I had hoped that the motors were internally wired differently so that we could rotate the motors through 180 degrees and use them on the opposite side. But unfortunately, that's not the case. That does mean that the motor is going to be slightly differently placed to what WOLFBOX wants us to use, but I think this is still going to work. Why have I got this tool, and why am I holding this, and why am I saying that it's scary? Well, in order to get this down there, we have to pass this through a hole that already exists in the back of the cab. And that means we need to de-pin this connector because this connector will not fit through. Luckily though, I have a full set of harness de-pinning tools. I just remove that little orange thing there, and then literally all I have to do is put this tool in here and slowly de-pin every single one of these connectors while telling my lovely assistant here what colour goes where, and then we can reconstitute it on the other side. So we've passed the de-pinned loom through the back of the truck. Now this is the connector. Now I just have to remarry it all and hope we got it right. Well, you can see I now have side steps that do this when you close the door. You might also notice that my hair looks a little bit tidier than it did towards the end of yesterday. I'm wearing a different outfit and, well, it's for an embarrassing reason. See, this thing here is what I'm using to record my audio on. It's a little Zoom F2 recorder, and this is the microphone cable. And the microphone cable has not one, but two connections. This is a micro dot microphone, and this is a micro dot to 3.5mm adapter. And the 3.5mm adapter is properly connected. The micro dot yesterday came loose, and it came loose because I was rolling on the floor underneath the truck. I just hit the unlock button. I apologize for that. And that meant that the audio sounded like this. So I put this is it all. Yeah, I decided that you probably didn't want to hear that. So instead, you missed the last bit of the installation, but the last bit of the installation was pretty simple. I'll talk you through it right now. Instead of putting the motors at the front, we put the motors at the rear. Each motor was attached to the frame of the truck with 3 bolts, and what you had to do was loosely tighten the bolts on the back side of that mounting point to make sure that the actual frame was attached, but it wasn't properly tightened up. And then you did the same at the front, where on this truck the passive units sit. And then you need to put in slots in the underside of the step. So on the underside of this step, there are 4 bolts per side. So 4 here and then 4 here. So 8 on this step and 8 on the other. You slot them in, and sometimes the actual getting the bolt in was a bit complicated. So what we ended up doing was actually removing the end, which is just a plastic cap that's held in place with 2 self-tapping screws. So once you remove that, you can slide the bolts in, and then you have to align the bolts and bolt it on. Again, loosely. Make sure that the side step is properly aligned, and I did that by starting the step just after the start of the front door and then making sure that it lined up here at the end, and did that on both sides. You then have to open and close the door a few times with everything still loose to make sure that this does exactly what it's supposed to do. And once you're happy that this is operating as it should, you go in and you snug up all of the cables. Then you connect the looms up properly and you connect the optional LED lights. And then when you open the door on the side you want to get in, the step automatically deploys. The other side obviously doesn't open unless you open the door. And what do I think of the installation process? Well, I know that we did this backwards. So instead of putting the motors at the front, which was what WOLFBOX's installation recommended, we put the motor at the rear. Instead of putting the passive units at the rear, we put them at the front. And that allowed me to route the cables that way instead of that way. I think my solution is cleaner. I think my solution avoids getting dust on any of the control box mechanism, and the only exposed connectors are the fully waterproof ones that are hiding behind the cab, between the cab and the pickup body, and there's a couple underneath. The whole process was longer, I think, than the official WOLFBOX install, but I'm very happy with the end result. I've talked about the installation process and you've watched me install this in a backwards configuration that is very different to WOLFBOX's official documented setup. I should note though that WOLFBOX has a great full color user manual that comes in the box. There are also PDFs you can download from its website. It also has videos that you can use to follow through if you're not sure about the installation process. And that really accommodates a wide range of different learning styles. And I really like that. A lot of companies focus on either just a manual or just a video, and WOLFBOX has chosen to do both. There's also a support email that you can reach out to if you have a problem with the product, either during or post installation. And there are some very quick troubleshooting guides online that you can also follow if things don't go the way that you hope they are. But look, let's talk about the actual product. From a stylistic point of view, I think this is going to take some getting used to. I'm used to the profile of my truck with a permanent fixed side step. That permanent fixed side step was kind of chunky. It stuck out on the side of the truck. And now with my boards stowed, I think this line is certainly more rugged. It looks more off-road friendly. And it looks like the truck is taller even though it isn't. But the important thing I like is that when you open this and the step actually deploys, the step is lower down than the stock fixed step. It's also slightly further outboard of the vehicle, which gives you more to step onto. WOLFBOX claims 600 pounds as the weight limit for this, which is more than enough for most applications. And I think the grip on this is better than the Ford stock fixed side steps. If you have an F-150 Lightning or an F-150 and you've tried to step on those fixed factory side steps in bad weather, whether that's lots of rain or ice or snow, you may have slipped off. I've done that like 4 or 5 times in a couple of years of F-150 Lightning ownership, and I feel just by running my shoe over this step that there's more to grip with than the textured, not really a grip, more of a pattern that you get on the stock side steps. And of course, because it comes out further and goes down further than the stock side step, it means it's easier to get in and out of the vehicle if you are someone who struggles to lift your leg up very far. It's a more easy ingress and egress than the stock steps. It's also good for pets. I've tried this with both of my dogs, and one of them jumped in and then used the step coming out, and there didn't seem to be any concerns there from them. As far as they're concerned, they're just steps. I think getting used to them coming down and going back up if they were standing right next to them might be an issue, but I have border collies and they're known for being quite neurotic. The other thing I want to highlight here is the fact that the step is currently deployed and my door is closed, except my door is not fully closed. If your door is not properly closed, the steps will not stow away. And that's a great indication if you have children or people who travel with you regularly who struggle to slam the doors on these trucks. These are heavy doors and it can require quite a lot of force to properly close them. Right now, this is on effectively the first catch, the safety catch of the door mechanism. But if I open it and then I properly close it, we wait about 3 seconds and it will automatically stow. So if you are parking up somewhere and you have kids in the rear and they get out and they slam the door, but they don't slam it hard enough and the steps stay deployed, that means you haven't properly locked your vehicle. That's an added bonus, I think, for anyone who has this system. Now let's talk about some things that I'm not so happy about. While I loved the installation process, while I thought that the official WOLFBOX documentation was very good, and while I threw caution to the wind against most of it and did my own custom install, the thing that really irks me are the lights. Now, the lights are stuck to the body of the frame of the truck using 3M pads, and there's nothing wrong with 3M. It's a very well-respected, well-known adhesive brand. You stick it to the weld points on the underside of the truck and you have 2 LED lights per side. But what WOLFBOX doesn't seem to have taken into account is proper cable routing for those lights. Now, we ended up getting creative with some cable ties and the result is a little bit janky, I'm not going to lie. And that janky setup would be true whether you were doing it the proper way from the front or whether you're doing it my way in reverse from the back. I feel like WOLFBOX needs to add some adhesive-backed cable tie mounts to allow you to properly manage those light cables underneath the vehicle. Because in our experience, the Loom is actually quite a bit longer than you need to put the lights in the midpoint of each door. And if you don't properly manage those cables, they will eventually scrape on the ground. We have temporarily attached them, but I think we're going to go back when we've grabbed hold of some proper adhesive pads and we'll stick that in properly. But the little niggle about lights aside, I think this is a really good addition, especially given its $1,300 US MSRP, or $1 less than that if we want to be pedantic. I should point out though that just as with the tonneau cover we did a couple of weeks ago, this is a modification that you should make to your vehicle if you think it will improve your quality of life, not because you're trying to increase the value of your vehicle. Now, there are some things that you can do to your vehicle to improve its MSRP and its resaleability. Ceramic coating, for example, is one of them. But when it comes to additions like side steps and tonneau covers, they're not going to dramatically affect your used car market price. They are things that you should put on because you want to put them on, not because you think the next buyer is going to want them. I've seen a rising trend in the industry right now of people complaining on the used car market that a vehicle with lots of modifications that they've made is not worth much more than a vehicle that doesn't have any of those modifications. And that's because at the end of the day, car valuation systems take into consideration some very basic things: how old your vehicle is, what its mileage is, what its overall condition is, and the overall mechanical condition and paint condition. And whether you've added extra things like side steps doesn't normally factor in, unless your vehicle is very, very rare or you are selling to a very niche market. But I like these. I think they actually add function to my vehicle. They don't flex. And I think they make the truck look pretty cool. But what about you? Do you like the idea of automatic side steps? Do you think they're a gimmick? Do you worry that they're going to get caught up in snow and mud? By the way, WOLFBOX says these are tested to negative 40 degrees Celsius, but it's the summer. I haven't tested these in snow. That's another caveat you should probably take away with you. Thanks for watching until the end of the video. If you've got this far, let me know your thoughts in the down below, and also tell me, because I want to make sure that you've watched until the end, what your favourite add-on for your electric vehicle is. Thanks very much to WOLFBOX for sending us these. Follow the links below if you want to get one yourself. The links that are listed on this video are not kickbacks for us. They are just links to give you discounts on buying your own set. We do not benefit monetarily from any of those links. But if you'd like to support the channel, there's a cool way that you can do that, and that's by joining us from $1.50 a month, either on Patreon or YouTube, by sending us Ko-fi, sending us a one-off donation via snail mail, or by buying some swag from our swag store. And you can join this amazing long list of supporters flying by right now. Without them, we wouldn't be able to make videos like this. Make sure you've hit subscribe, make sure you tell the important people in your life that they are so important to you, and until next time, keep evolving.